I want you to picture this with me. It's a Thursday night, because that's the only night none of you work, and 2 of you have to drive in all the way from Santa Monica, so you didn't actually start until 8 p.m. You've got the kitchen table awkwardly pushed in against the bookshelf because your 1-bedroom apartment doesn't have room for a full 6-person seating arrangement. Everybody's sharing dice trays on makeshift stations because the battle mat takes up the entire coffee table, and you're using Warhammer minis as the bad guys and the pieces from Betrayal at the House on the Hill as the good guys because it's session 2, and nobody's committed enough to the game itself, let alone their characters, to go out and buy a $15 plastic elf. You've just broken Reddit's first rule of DMing, forcing the party to solve riddles, which is almost impossible to roleplay, but you thought you were clever, because it was a trap anyway, an unsolvable riddle leading directly to a combat encounter. You had to steal the one from Alice in Wonderland because you ran out of time to write one yourself, but it's okay, because it made it easier to spot and your players are being good sports. Your clown fairy Pickles is very upset that these travelers won't play fair, and as he dives into the ground, so does every tree in a quarter-mile radius, chunking out of view like cat claws. A forest in full vanished in the blink of an eye. That's when you know it was worth it. The look in the eyes of your party is electric. They're ravenous. Your little murder hobos want to drag Pickles kicking and screaming out of the earth and roast him over the fire like a painted-up marshmallow. What they'll get instead is a shambling mound, hand-picked from the monster manual to temporarily swallow the party's druid, because turning into a bear at level 2 is a giant pain in the ass to balance encounters for. But when they're done with it, they'll still dig around for that little shit Pickles. And in the next town, they'll ask about him, and so on and so forth. Pickles the Clown Fairy is now an icon, a reference, an immutable piece of your bond both in and out of the game. The sales pitch for dozens of nights spent in a cramped apartment playing Dungeons & Dragons instead of doing literally anything else. I, personally, wouldn't have it any other way. Now, traditionally speaking, tabletop RPGs are quite a hard sell to the average person, not only because of the commitment, but simply the optics. An RPG on a table? Where I have to do it myself? Practice little voices in the bathroom when nobody's home? That sounds like LARPing, and LARPing is for nerds, and as we all know, Professor Moriarty, nerds rarely, if ever, have sex. But Dungeons & Dragons in specific has enjoyed a recent surge in popularity through sheer force of exposure. They played it on Stranger Things. That movie was pretty fun. Critical Role played fucking Wembley Stadium. And those guys are hot. And if hot people can play it, why shouldn't I? You're right to think that way. The simple fact of the matter is, Dungeons & Dragons has never been so mechanically and culturally accessible as it is right now. The stonks are up. Wizards of the Coast is going the whole 9 yards on getting normies into this game because they keep fucking up all their other ones, and nobody stands to benefit more than you. You who secretly always thought it would be fun. You who love storytelling and desperately crave a new creative outlet. You who need an excuse to drag all your friends together once a week because it's just hard to get a commitment out of any of them. And you who hate going out in Hollywood because there's no parking in Hollywood. And your apartment costs over $2,000 a month. And god damn it, you're gonna use the space. So let's talk about the game. At its core, Dungeons & Dragons is a game about psychotic orphaned wayfarers who kill anything that stands between them and the cool shit they see in the corner of the room, only occasionally stopping to ask questions like, whose cool stuff is this? And are they evil? And if I kill them, do I get more cool stuff? Yes, you get more cool stuff. A new character is what you get, because you finished the campaign. This process takes several years, and for some reason, at the end of it, you will love your fake self more than some of your real family members. When the game was created by Gary Gygax and Dave Arnson in 1974, the questions were barely even a part of it. You'd rock up to your buddy's house, he'd give you a pre-written character, and you'd clear out a dungeon full of freaks or die trying. Hard stop. But like a fine wine or a hard cheese, D&D has matured, richened, evolved, become more expensive and pretentious over the last 50 years. And thanks to the proliferation of actual play, it has become decidedly about the role play in the eyes of much of the general public. The truth, as with all things, lies somewhere in the middle, exists on a spectrum, is entirely up to you and your group of friends. There is, at this point in the evolution of D&D, no clear objective. It is a game that hands you a set of rules and, if you choose to engage with it, a setting and lore, and says, okay kids, go tell a story. How complex or narratively challenging that story is can easily be adjusted, and, much more importantly, is subject to taste. So let's start from the foundation and work our way up to the tailored experience. Here's what you absolutely need to play Dungeons & Dragons. 3 to 9 people, but preferably 5 to 7. Dice of 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and 20 sides. At least 2 sets, but preferably 1 for every person. Scratch paper, and some kind of screen or divider so that one player can obscure their field. That's it. The sheets, and the trays, and the books, and the maps, and the minis, and those dope-ass spell effect rulers Matt Mercer uses are all cool, but you do not need them. You can work with bare-bones rules pulled from the internet, and everything else can be improv and imagination. Isn't that beautiful? No, it's scary, but that's not everyone's problem. D&D is a role-playing game, but on one side of the table are the player characters, the protagonists, the people the story is happening to. And on the other side of the table is the Dungeon Master, the engine of the story, they who drew the short straw, and now must lay track for their idiot friends and their insane decisions for until they get bored or become gods, whichever comes last. Who runs the game is, in most cases hopefully, a question of who prefers the most creatively challenging role, or who has the most prep time, or I guess if all else fails, the host? As a DM, I can promise it is a rewarding thing. But also, if you do bad, everyone has a bad time. And also, you have to do the most voices. So, strictly speaking, here's how a Dungeons & Dragons campaign will begin. The DM will assemble a group of players and express to them the kind of campaign they'll be running. The setting, the style of play, that kind of stuff. D&D comes with a setting you can learn and use. I personally think it's kind of boring. You can make one up yourself, or you can just adopt any functional setting from existing fiction or even real history. Once everyone's on board, the players will work with the DM and usually at least a little bit with each other to create characters. Names, hometowns, alignments, backstories, races, and classes. Probably not in that order. I'm not going to break down every option here, maybe someday, but here's my personal favorites. I like dwarves because I think their stocky bodies and giant beards are funny, and I love goblins because they're goblins. Classes are far more important because the party needs balance. They don't die. The 12 core classes of D&D 5e cover various roles: magic and martial, support and frontline, melee and ranged, useful outside of combat, and barbarian. The traditional, iconic party of 4 is a fighter to fight, a rogue to explore, a cleric to heal, and a wizard to cast fireball. But again, as the game has evolved and subclasses have taken root, not to mention parties often growing quite large, the combinations are functionally endless. My favorite class is Paladin, because they're simple yet deeply interesting to roleplay, and my least favorite is Sorcerer, because they're nature's nepo babies. How to decide for yourself? Start 12 campaigns of Baldur's Gate 3 at once and just see which sticks. Now, the real answer is read the rules. Something will stand out. In that Dungeons & Dragons is a role-playing game, the role you wish to fulfill will make itself clear to you. Do you want to be a himbo barbarian who likes drinking ale and picking fights? Do you want to be an edgelord rogue who plays coy about his backstory because you were too lazy to write one? Do you want to be an overzealous cleric whose character quirk is casual fantasy racism? Maybe check with your gaming group on that, but the point is the possibilities are endless. On that, it warrants mentioning D&D Beyond is a helpful site that houses all the vital information necessary to set up and make characters, as well as filling the world with combat encounters and rewards and stuff before committing fully to buying the various source books. Also, there's a wiki.website dedicated to 5e that houses a compendium of all the published information since the edition came out, and it's totally free, but don't tell Wizards of the Coast or they'll Nintendo bomb it. So now we've got a DM who has ready built a world full of gods and monsters and factions and ruins and things to explore and to learn and to engage with, and a party who are ready to ignore it all and start killing stuff, or seducing it if there's a bard. What else do we need? Well, technically nothing. It's hard to express without the benefit of example just how easily and universally D&D captures the chaotic, childlike joy of play. Settling into the idea of role-playing is not for the easily embarrassed, but if you and your friends can simply commit to it, shed your egos, and truly believe for but a moment that you are a squad of fantasy riffraff on the hunt for some magic MacGuffin buried under a pile of orcs and demons and vampires, then the shenanigans will follow, and you will long forget what you were ever concerned about. And if you don't believe me, lucky for you, there's examples out the ass. I'll wait for you right here. Go on and watch the nice people at Critical Role for a while, or D20, or Legends of Evantris, or Chain of Acheron, or Dungeons and Daddies, or any of the other 700 avenues of D&D actual play that have seeped into every corner of the internet over the last 10 years. It is by no metric an exaggeration to say Dungeons & Dragons has surpassed socially acceptable, skipped over normalized like a stone on a pond, and landed squarely in the realm of objectively popular in a meteoric rise of nerd shit not seen since Season 1 of Attack on Titan. That a hobby once considered so unsavory as to inspire moral panic media starring Tom Hanks in his first leading role has now achieved such staggering heights that people pay money to watch other people do it. Hard stop. There is no greater proof of concept. And it all comes back to the same thing. The limitless, irreplicable joy of creation to see a story come to life in real time. If it's entertaining enough to just live it vicariously through others, even if they are cooler and funnier than you, think just how truly rewarding it would be to do it yourself, unbound by anything but your imagination and the percent chance of failure inherent to rolling dice. The reason the previous section of this video ends when the campaign starts is because I physically cannot describe more of the game to you. Dungeons & Dragons is by its nature a game that gives back what you put into it. You could start from zero and claw your way to legend status, saving the world in hours-long combat encounters like the heroes you are. Or you could run a Regency game, no combat at all, just skill checks and politics and Machiavellian roleplay. Or you could cut out all the magic and run a realism campaign, where death is cheap and every die roll is a game-changing gamble. You can hide the result of every roll from each other and pass secret notes. You can force everyone to do an accent so the DM doesn't feel alone. You can stop every 10 minutes to snack and name all your characters Bart Simpson prank names. It doesn't matter. My buddy worked on that movie, The Beekeeper, right before we started our current campaign. So he made his character a Jason Statham stand-in and filled his backstory with Statham movie references. Can he hold the accent? Absolutely not. But that's what makes it fun. Is that fun to you? Almost definitely not. But then we return to the point that you just kinda have to trust me that this game is great, and you will quickly find the way that you want to play it. What it is, ultimately, that will drag you over the line, from wide-eyed level 1 mercenaries doing fetch quests for the town wizard to superheroes, dripped out in magic garbage, teleporting halfway across the world to kill dragons and hatch their eggs as your pets. Painstakingly earned through hours upon hours of rolling dice and doing voices, is that you are telling your story. You are creating a story tailor-made for you, told in part by you about a carefully crafted, no matter how aesthetically or morally or fundamentally different, version of you. Any good story is addictive, in a sense. You want to know what happens next. You want to spend more time with the characters you find so charming and interesting. A good role-playing video game takes this a step further, making you an active member of the story, urging you to live it the way you want to and change the way it plays out, but still mostly mechanically. A tabletop role-playing game, especially one with a good GM, especially one with a committed group of players, achieves the ultimate goal of truly telling your own story. You will meet people that you want to protect or want to kill. You will decide fates and affect politics. You will face consequences for your actions and your decisions and your random chance failures. You may die and be replaced, and you, the player, will have to not just be okay with it all, but take it in stride. Continue the story, because this particular world does not actually revolve around you. I think that's what's so uniquely addictive about D&D. It's what you know you're missing, what could have been and still could be. That there is no right way to play, but in that sense, there are thousands of choices that could net you anything you could want to know or experience, and they're all waiting for you to figure them out because you know if it's cool enough, the DM will let you do anything. It's like jazz in some ways, and like punk rock in others. It sounds like a bad fusion, but what is jazz punk if not ska? And what is ska if not enthralling? Or at least charmingly chaotic. If it seems daunting to spend years of your life collectively telling one story, it kind of is. But you don't have to start like that. Play a single session, a one-shot, don't buy any books or whatever, eyeball everything, just to get a feel for what D&D is really like. 1 or 2 sessions, and you'll probably get it. The blunt mechanics of rolling dice are much more electric when it's your ass on the line. And more to the point, improv is more fun when there isn't an already bored audience across from you shouting sex words at every suggestion. GM prep I don't really have anything for. A lot of it is still homework, but it is worth it when the players get excited. It's like if you had a pop quiz every day, and there's always stuff you didn't even learn about in class, but if you somehow answer it right, everybody cheers. But then also you have to remember what you guessed, because there will be follow-up questions on the next pop quiz. Being a GM is very rewarding, in the way that I imagine defusing a bomb probably is. So yeah, that's D&D. Not the bomb thing, the whole video. It's a tabletop RPG, built mostly around complex yet flashy combat, but made popular for the ironically limitless applications of its quite streamlined and simplistic roleplay. It's a gateway drug for what many people, myself included, would say is the deepest and most rewarding genre of game there is. It's just a storytelling device, meant to be molded and shaped and made art by your hands, and then repeatedly broken over your knee. If that doesn't sound at least worth a shot to you, I can only assume that you just only like science fiction. But lucky for you, I've got another 20 minutes to rant about a game called Lancer. All right, scene 2. Ready? It's Friday night, 11 o'clock. You've been blasting a Cruel Angel's thesis on a loop for 3.5 straight hours, and that's just one combat encounter.